everybody, welcome to Leon's Chainsaw Parts and Repair. It is hotter than blazing hell. 100 degrees in my backyard. So what it is here in the garage with the fan moving, I'm not sure, but it's not far off of that, so we'll see how this goes. Looking at Tom's 150. He picked this up from, I believe, the original owner, and it had been sitting for quite some time. He indicated there had been a little bit of mixed fuel still in here, and it smells like stale fuel, but it doesn't smell like that rancid, oh my god, there's going to be varnish that's, well, like this. That's what happened. I don't even remember which one of these saws now. Fuel tank had a bunch of varnish in the bottom. That's what acetone and then gasoline managed to get out. I mean, that stuff's nasty. So, anyway, got to get this thing apart. We're going to do a fuel hose. We'll do a carb kit. And I realized, you know what? Probably not too many guys have taken the time to put a video up on YouTube of how these 150s come apart. And it's not super obvious if you haven't done one. So I've already taken the air filter cover off. That's just one screw here, but I figured I'd walk you guys through the rest of it. So we're going to take our starter off, and you can leave the handle in place. I mean, it's easier to get to that one screw, but if it's not there, but it's not critical. Now these have, you saw I was being real careful, these have a unique starter setup. Have an overrunning bearing. So when you pull the rope, the shaft spins in there, the bearing locks, spins the engine over. The other direction it releases. So you remember some of the XPs? Oh, and a couple of the C-Series saws. I don't remember exactly which. I think it was the C51, and then the XP 1000, XP 1020, maybe even the 1100. Had a race up here and a bearing that slipped over the top of it. Well, this is that same basic principle, but by design this starter, you can see there ain't much holding this together. There's no screw in here. The spring and being screwed in place is what holds that there. So you want to be careful to twist this in the opposite way that the rope would turn it as you're pulling up. That way it releases the bearing and you don't pull this out and explode your recoil spring. Because none of us likes rewinding a recoil spring. I gotta check this message real quick. We may have to cut this short. Yeah. Yep, we'll come back to this, folks. So the next step, getting this beast apart, is to get your carburetor loose. And these bolts here do secure the carburetor. There's a flange behind it. We'll see when we get it apart. But this is an air deflector. And then there are two bushings right here that basically hold that carburetor where it's supposed to be. Now normally they come out a little bit easier than this. Can't say that I'm impressed with that. If you pry on that too much, you're going to bend it. It's just soft aluminum. So let's see if we can nudge those things loose. So far, that's not. There we go. I got that side. See, I hadn't run across ones that had glued themselves in place like that before. It's interesting. Yeah, so those center the carburetor up so that those screws will actually hit the proper flange back there. So it's really important that you get that loose first. And then you got 2 screws down here and 2 screws up here. So I'm going to go ahead and get the, I'm trying to remember. Actually, I don't think the drive case cover has to come off. It's been a while since I've done one of these. But that should stay with the handle and the engine itself. I've seen a lot of cases where guys will start attacking like these screws on the handle back here and thinking that you got to split the tank apart. That is not the case. This is not meant to ever come apart. Fuel tank is permanently bonded and components within it are considered not serviceable. These all have roll pins here that they're pivoting off of, so if we had an issue, that would be the way to handle it. Now, controlling those springs behind there, God knows how you do it. Thankfully, I may have replaced one of these trigger latches once before, but I honestly don't remember. It's been too long. Anyway, with those screws out, this thing ought to just slide apart. See how it's starting to separate there? Ooh, look how dirty that is. That. Okay. That's why on this saw that handle does have to come off. I was thinking there might be something I was forgetting. There is not clearance to get that housing past there. We'll get the handle out of the way. Not room for that socket down in there. There we go. We'll see if we can get them by hand. How many threads are on you? This design has confused a lot of people over the years, and it's probably been labeled about like a mini Mac. It's kind of hard to work on, and there are some pieces that are, but look at that, we just got the engine right there. You got your coil, there's the intake manifold I was talking about, and a bunch of sawdust and shat that we need to get all cleaned up. That's your on-off switch contact point, so you've got a wire and a contact right there. That should be off, yeah. So you see how I push the contact down, that'll ground it out. Right there, to that contact. The choke is buried. This is where it gets interesting. So now that I've got those spacers out, I'm going to have to get the fuel line disconnected down here. And then carefully, the choke rod, you can't see it because of all the garbage back in here. I got to get this cleaned out, but it's buried back here, and you basically have to pull it out of this choke button. There's a retainer, a spring clip back here that'll hold the choke button if you're lucky. If you're, well, we're going to be hosing it off, so it'll have to come off, I think, and we'll make sure we don't lose it. But then you slide the rod out and then angle the carburetor, and you can get the throttle linkage off. So it's kind of tight and compact, and if you don't know the way it goes back together, you could have some real trouble with it. But that's it right there. And that's going to be as far as we should have to take this down. I'll probably pull the flywheel once I've got everything cleaned up so that I can put some electronic cleaner in there on the points, and any water that has gotten in I can dry out. We'll put a new spark plug on it. See, that's off. That plug looks like shat. I might run this thing over with the drill while I've got it out, just to make sure that we don't have an issue with ignition, but I don't think we do. I can't remember Tom's note. I don't think he mentioned any ignition issues. This saw is fairly low hour, 75 model. It's obviously been well cared for. You can see the clearance. The clutch to the drum is pretty tight. I mean, I can't even get this screwdriver to go more than just a tiny bit in there. So the clutch isn't worn. This is an S clutch, so you always want to check those for a broken shoe. Now, if you roll the engine over and you get a clunk out of your drum, I guarantee that's a broken shoe. And at that point, you're replacing the clutch. But the clutch drum, the sprocket, you can see the teeth look pretty damn good on there, so there's no reason to take this off. So, yeah, I'll stand by what I said a minute ago. Get all this stuff cleaned up. We'll replace the fuel hose, rebuild that carb. This thing should be a runner. Okay, so this is the cleaned up version. We'll see how this goes. This obviously hasn't been apart in a long time, if ever. So you got to get that fuel hose off. Alright, that is starting to rot. Which, there we go. It was just rotten enough that it was soft, but not rotten enough that it was rock hard and a pain in the ass. So we lucked out. So from here, you say it's kind of a fun little exercise trying to if I'm remembering right, and I can't see for shat down in there. I think you have to take the choke out. I'm going to try without bending anything to see if I can get the throttle here first. Nope. Alright, so there's the choke rod right back. You guys aren't going to be able to see a squatting thing. It's right back here. And the spring's going to come... Ooh, it didn't. I don't know why. I just pulled that choke rod straight up, and then I rotated the carb off. I'm going to do my best not to disturb this right here. I can't believe that stayed in place. I've got it set on full choke. Not sure that matters at all, but it is in one of the detents. That probably does matter. So then you want to take note of how you came out with it. So that's the orientation of the choke rod right there. You're going to hook it back onto the throttle rod and push this part of the choke rod right through the button there. I'm going to take this off because obviously this carburetor is not clean enough to rebuild yet. But that's the process for getting it out. Okay, here's the fun and games. So I rebuilt this, right? I would take that back. I went through this carburetor. There was no need to rebuild it. All it needed was a little bit of varnish cleaned out and a new inlet needle. Diaphragms were spotless, pliable, beautiful. So no real reason to do anything with them. Alright. I'm going to get this thing set up. So as I drop it in, it's in alignment. So this is part of the carburetor that goes to the engine. It's hard to get it clocked backwards because you've got your fuel barb. That's got to hook up to the hose there. So you need this rod so that that top end will go straight down. So that dictates where it has to go. Pretty easy. Again, if you got one of these that was already apart and you hadn't seen it, this would be a nightmare. So I'm going to slip that as tight as I can right there. It's still got some junk holding it in place. That'll be the one difficult part, or potentially. So I'm going to hold that rod in place, and I'm going to slip it onto the throttle rod here. You may have to lift up like I did there. And again, there's no damn way I can get this on camera. But what I'm doing is I'm guiding the carburetor up through. I'm going to guide the screws up through the holes in the housing here. And at the same time, the choke rod is starting to push on the button there. So I've kind of got it halfway in place. And I'm going to try and use these needle nose pliers to put it all the way. Damn it. And I'm going to hold the button from the outside. I think it might have. Nope. Something on the angle's not quite. Shoot. Not quite right here. I don't know if I have the setting on the carb. There it goes. It's actually, ouch, actually easier to use my damn finger. Doesn't feel good. But then what you're going to want to do when it's hanging like that, be careful not to let it flop too much. Come around over here and pull the carb up where it belongs so that those holes line up, and then slip these guides back in because that'll hold it in place. Now again, I let the carb move, so this is going to be a little more bumbling than, damn it, probably necessary. I'm not happy with you right now, carburetor. What the hell is this thing doing? I'm going to open, there we go. Maybe. Looks like they are lining up better with the choke all the way open. And the fact that I was able to operate the choke means I gotta have this close. There we go. That's your test. Make sure the choke operates and your throttle. And it is. And it is. Ain't glamorous, but it works. So the fuel hose obviously needs to be hooked up down here, so let's go ahead and do that now that we've got those bolt sleeves in place to hold the carburetor there. And you can see we've got a little more sticking through there than we need. So that's the routing on the fuel hose. It's kind of funky, but it works. So what you're going to do is grab right here and pull until you've got the straight run, sweeping curve, no kinks. That is critical, no kinks. If you got a default to leaving a little extra, it's far better than not enough, because not enough, it will not run. Then over here, you can see I left the hose out the top of the tank. We're going to do the same thing. We want to get as low a profile as we can, but not cause a kink situation. And that right there looks pretty good. Now this thin wall hose, we're going to replace this filter. But not the whole filter assembly, I don't think. I think I've got I know I do. I'll just have to remember to take this out of inventory. That's how shortages end up happening 99% of the time. Every once in a while I can't find something when someone's ordered it, but usually it's like that, where I've gone and pulled one off the shelf to use it on a repair and forgotten to pull it out of the computer. Okay, so if you've got your old filter, there's two different sizes. There's this one, which is smaller, and then there's the bigger one. But if you can find a replacement felt, I personally think that's better. Now, some people hate these felt filters, and that's based on, in my opinion, their experience with the newer felts that are made in China and don't have any quality control. I haven't had one of these old school, old stock style filters plug up a carburetor. The cheapos will shed those little fibers and plug up the inlet screen. But the ones that the OEMs used, I haven't had that problem with. So just slip the new one right down on the old fitting there. And actually they usually go a little easier than that. There we go. Sometimes you got a corkscrew in place. But that is a better quality filter than you're going to get from China. Sorry, but it's true. And to ease getting the hose over there, because this is 1/8 inch inside diameter hose that I used, but it's thin wall. It's a 3/16 outside. So the wall's only a 32nd of an inch thick. It flexes. You can't, damn it. This thing's lost. Oop, oil can lost its prime, and of course, right about the time I got fed up and gave it a good pump, that's when it reprimed. So you want a little bit of oil on the outside of it. That'll help slide this into place. And what you're going to end up doing is stretching the hose a little bit. And depending on the temperature outside, you may or may not need pliers, but the pliers make it a hell of a lot easier. That's the one downside to reusing this old filter assembly, is getting it started is just a sucko. If this one keeps fighting me, we're going to get something stretch the end of that hose. There it goes. Once you reach, there we go. Once you reach the point where it's gone over that retainer lip, as long as you make sure it doesn't slip out when you go to reposition your pliers. You see how I'm working from side to side, back and forth. This is where the oil is critical. It's helping that hose slide down. And it's also important to note you can cut the hose with these needle nose pliers if you're not careful. Not super easily, but if you grab it down here and start reefing on it, you'll tear it every time. You've got to compress it from up top like this. Okay. Filters in place. Booyah. Okay, we are ready to put that engine back together, which again should be remarkably easy now that the carburetor's back in here. I need to test it for spark, and if for some reason we have to pull that apart, I'll show you that too. Alright, things are going good. Had spark. Alright, so we had those three were holding our handle on. Those four hold the engine in. Those two are the carburetor. And those are the starters. So getting it back together is just exactly the opposite of taking it apart. Start by rotating it in. There we go. Now you want your spark plug wire to be laying like this. And if it's the old one, it'll be formed into shape. If for some reason you had to replace that, it may be less obvious, but you want it below the contact here and basically laying against the muffler as you slide this thing into place. Just like that. And at this point you make sure you've got good access to your spark plug wire, which is relative. You never have good access. That is one thing on these saws that I dislike. How deep the damn spark plug is in there. To get the wire off, you're always going to have to use a screwdriver unless your finger is the size of that screwdriver. But it's not pinched. You can see it's moving. So let's get some screws started here. And you always want to give them a couple turns just to make sure you don't have anything cross-threaded. You can helicoil these blocks, but why screw it up if you don't have to? Okay, I'm loving it. Now before I tighten that all the way down, I shouldn't have to do this, but I want to start these carburetor screws too. And look at that, it started without any jacking around. There's no BS there. So if that doesn't happen, figure out why. Because that guide, and the way these guides are made, the carburetor's held at the exact right angle to go into that intake manifold. Now I don't think it's even possible to put that thing on backwards, like a 180 reverse, but if they don't start easily, stop and figure it out. Don't reef on them. It won't end well for you. Okay, so I'm comfortable. Those are where they belong. Okay, that's simple. Pretty cool. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put on the handle, the starter, the air filter cover. Cap needs a duckbill valve, and I will come back for a test run. Okay, all together, let's give it a test run. Oh, that helps. not bad. I actually managed to partially flood it on that initial couple pulls without the damn spark plug wire hooked up. Still got to test the automatic oiler without it in the vise, make sure it was going to take a while to reprime. And I can see that this muffler isn't sandwiched properly, but that is too damn hot for me to screw with right now, so I'm not going to. It was set very rich, like almost a turn and a half too rich for some reason. I'm not sure what would have been going on that needed that. And the initial smoke was the oil that had been put into the cylinder before it was stored quite some time ago. So that was actually good. That preserved the cylinder walls. And I mean, you gotta be in a pretty moist environment, pretty nasty to rust a cylinder when it's sitting. But you know what? If you're in an outbuilding on the coast, or you know, a wet area of Alaska or something like that, where the air may not ever totally dry out, yeah, it can happen. So that method of storage is quite good. So anyway, yeah, I see what looks like that's water right around there. I don't know if that thing's pumping yet or not, but I'll check on that. In general, these 150s are kind of overlooked. They're an odd looking saw, but with a bar they're balanced. I mean, you can see that's hanging back. You put a 16-inch bar on here and all of a sudden you're going to have a very balanced saw, easy to use. They're 44 cc's. They're even bigger than a Super EZ, and they're piston ported. This is the earliest Homelite that I am aware of, and this would have come out in 68 or 69, that doesn't have reed valves. It's the only model until you get up to, God, I'm thinking the 290 and 340, as I'm remembering, don't have reed valves, but of course those were a solo engineered saw. They're a German saw. So yeah, quite a few years went by and they stuck with the reed valves, but this one lone wolf was a piston port. Most of the McCullochs were piston port, especially by the time these came around. But anyway, kind of unique. You heard it has good throttle response. They do have good power, and there's plenty of parts available for them. I think Homelite intended to sell a lot more of these than they did, and shops stocked up on them. They bought into that they were going to be a hot seller, and yeah, there's, like I say, a lot of parts out there. So anyway, I'm going to get this muffler in place the way it should be. When it's not so hot it burns my fingerprints off. Check that automatic oiler, and then Tom, I'm feeling good. This one's going to be heading your way real soon.